إلى قيام يوم الدين. Tonight, my dear brothers and sisters, we will talk about another principle of jurisprudence or a jurisprudential law known as قاعدة الجب or al-Islam يجب ما قبله. What do we mean by this principle? We know that every human being has to pray, fast, give khums, give zakat, go to hajj, has the ibadat. They're obligated with the ibadat, acts of worship. We also know that if a person commits a crime against another human being, for example, he severs his hand, he has to pay the diya, the blood money, for the organ that he severed. Or if he kills an individual, he has to pay his diya. And in addition to the diya, there's a kafara. And there's a penalty. He has to be punished. He has to be punished for that crime. These are consequences. This is called hudud. Hudud are the crimes, the penal system for a person who commits a crime or atrocity against others. In addition to financial obligations that one has, such as khums, zakat, and things like this. When a person becomes a Muslim and converts to Islam, this is the pivotal moment. And this is what Qa'adatul Jub is all about. Al-Islam yajubbu ma qabla. That Islam eliminates what precedes it. What is meant by this? Is that if a person converts to Islam and says the shahadatain, ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad, he converts into Islam, although before becoming a Muslim, he was required to pray, fast, give khums and zakat, go to hajj. But once he becomes a Muslim, all of those obligations fall. He is no longer required. He is no longer asked about the prayers and fasting and ibadat that he performed that he did not perform while he was a non-Muslim. This is called al-Islam yajubbu ma qabla, qa'adatul jub. That whatever a person did before Islam, he didn't pray, he didn't fast, he didn't give khums, he didn't give zakat, he didn't go to hajj. Although he was financially capable of going to hajj, yet he didn't go. As soon as he says the shahadatain and becomes a Muslim, he is no longer asked regarding those previous obligations. And also, if he committed a crime that needed a punishment, worthy of being punished, hudud, for example, he stole. And we know that the punishment in Islam, in an Islamic state, is that a thief, his hand has to be cut off. But once he becomes a Muslim, he will not be punished because of قاعدة الجب, al-Islam yajubbu ma qabla. He is not punished for the crimes that he committed while he was a non-Muslim. He will be punished and he will be held accountable for any crimes that he commits after his Islam, but not before his Islam. This is known as قاعدة الجب, al-Islam yajubbu ma qabla. Now, obviously, this is a very important principle. This is a very important law that affects converts to Islam. And in fact, this is one way that Islam makes it easy for converts to convert to Islam. That even if you're 80 years old, 90 years old, you lived a life of disobedience, you never prayed a single day in your life, you never fasted, but you are still welcome to convert to Islam, and you will not be held accountable for any obligations that you did not fulfill when you were a non-Muslim. You could be 90 years old and you convert to Islam and you prayed for a couple of days, you pass away, and that's it. You fulfilled your obligations. You do not have to worry about the obligations that you did not fulfill before Islam. Of course, this only applies to converts. What if one converts from other schools of thought to the Shi'i school of thought? What happens to their obligations? Do they have to repeat? Do they have to make up? Yes, if you missed any of the obligations, if you were from the Sunni school of thought and you converted to the Shi'i school of thought, if you missed certain obligations and acts of worship, you're required to fulfill them. And if you did fulfill them according to the Sunni school of thought, do you have to repeat them according to the Shi'i school of thought? No, you don't. No, you don't. Your salah is fine. Your hajj is fine. Your fasting is fine. Although our Sunni brothers and sisters, they break their fast before us. 12 minutes, 15 minutes before us. Yet still, when they become Shia, they do not need to repeat their a'mal. The only act of worship that they do have to repeat it, according to our narrations, is zakat. Is zakat. Because they gave their zakat to someone who is not deserving. Zakat only goes to the followers of Ahlul Bayt. Zakat, a wajib zakat, only goes to the followers of Ahlul Bayt. That is the only act that they will have to redo once they become followers of Ahlul Bayt. Once they become Shia. Otherwise, nothing. Nothing else has to be done over again. Let's come back to قاعدة الجب. Al-Islam يجب ما قبله. As soon as a person converts to Islam, they are not required, they are not asked about anything that they've done before Islam. You might say, well, this affects converts. What does it have to do with me? I didn't convert to Islam. I was born a Muslim. First of all, this is an important principle because a great deal of Muslims are converts, especially here in the United States of America. A great deal of Muslims are converts. This is one. Number two, it's good to know. It's good to know these laws in Islam, and especially the lenient laws of Islam, and how Islam is lenient and Islam is easygoing, and it makes things easier, especially for converts. It's a way to call people to Islam. Come and convert to Islam. You will not be asked about your previous a'mal. You have nothing to worry about. Now, what is the proof and evidence for this principle? قاعدة الجب. Here, ulama have put forward several pieces of evidence and proof, and we need to examine them. Is this evidence solid or is it not solid? Number one, they support their argument with the following verse in Surah Al-Anfal, verse 38. قُلْ لِلَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا إِنْ يَنْتَهُوا يُغْفَرْ لَهُمْ مَا قَدْ سَلَفْ. Tell the kuffar that if they stop being kuffar means what? They convert to Islam, they will be forgiven for what they've done in the past. Anything that they've done in the past, they will be forgiven for. Some ulama say that this verse means qa'datul jub. This means that any person who converts to Islam will not be asked about prior obligations, financial, such as khums and zakat, or physical, like salah and saum. However, this relying on this verse is problematic. Why? Because the verse says, قُلْ لِلَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا إِنْ يَنْتَهُوا. Tell the non-believers that if they stop disbelieving, meaning they accept Islam, يُغْفَرْ لَهُمْ. They will be forgiven. They didn't pray, Allah will forgive them. They didn't fast, Allah will forgive them. They committed a sin punishable by crime in Islam, they'll be forgiven. But they will not, they're not responsible for the repercussions. No. They don't have to make up their salah. The verse doesn't say that. They don't have to make up their fasting. The verse doesn't say that. The verse simply says that they will not be held accountable, meaning they will be forgiven. But are they in charge now? Are they responsible now for making up that salah? They won't be held accountable, but they have to do it. Maybe. Just being told that you're forgiven. Let me give you an example. It's like a person who didn't pay his property tax. He said, I didn't know that I had. A person just moved to the United States. He purchased a house, and I believe it's in November or December I know it's in June, right? One is in June and the other is in November, December. You have to pay your property tax. Person says, I didn't know. He goes to the government, he says, I didn't know that I had to pay property tax. They say, okay, that's it, that's fine. We won't punish you for that, but you still have to pay your property tax. You still have to pay it. We'll forgive you. You won't go to jail. We won't fine you. The property tax won't double, but you still have to pay it. So this verse, holding on to this verse is a bit problematic to support the principle of qa'idat al-jub. A second evidence supported by some scholars is a hadith narrated by Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi in Awali al-La'ali. Al-Islam yajubbu ma qablah. That Islam eliminates what preceded it. It's very clear. And in fact, the title of the principle is taken from this hadith. And it's very clear that whatever happened before Islam will be forgiven. Not just forgiven, but you will not be asked about. You didn't pray for 50 years and then you converted to Islam. You're not required to pray. This is very, very clear. The content is very clear. The content of the hadith is very clear. But the problem is where? In the chain of narrators. This hadith is narrated in Awali al-La'ali. Awali al-La'ali is authored by Ibn Abi Jumhur al-Ahsa'i. Ibn Abi Jumhur, when he authored this book, he mixed Sunni hadiths with Shi'i hadiths, and he took out their chain of narrators. He took out their chain of narrators. And they're mostly by Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And so there's no chain of narrators to this hadith. Is it reliable? Is it not reliable? We don't know. For us, it's not reliable because we don't see a chain of narrators. A third hadith that some use to argue, and this hadith is narrated in the book called Manaqib al-Abi Talib by Ibn Shahrashub, one of our scholars from the formative period. Basically, I'll summarize to you, I'll explain to you what the hadith is. A man came to Umar ibn al-Khattab and he told him that I divorced my wife once before converting to Islam and twice after converting to Islam. So how many times is that? That's 3. What happens when you divorce your wife 3 times? You can no longer go back to her, lest she marries someone else and that second person divorces her, then you may go back to her. As a punishment for the man who divorces numerously, for divorcing 3 times, now he has, if he wants to go back to her, she has to marry another man and a full marriage. And once he divorces her, if he decides on divorcing her, he may go back to her. Now this gentleman, he divorced his wife once before Islam and twice after converting to Islam. He asks Umar ibn al-Khattab, what should I do? Umar says, wait until Ali ibn Abi Talib arrives. Ali ibn Abi Talib, Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam, arrives. Umar tells him, say your story. He says his story. Amir al-Mu'mineen says, Hadam al-Islam ma kana qablah. Islam eliminated anything that preceded it, anything that was before it. Hiya عندك على واحدة. She is your wife and you have one more chance. One more chance. Why? Because he divorced her once before Islam and twice after Islam. The one that occurred before Islam is eliminated. It doesn't count. Because of قاعدة الجب. الإسلام يجب ما قبله. Because he did this before Islam and it works against his advantage, Islam says, you know what, I'll do you a favor. I will not count this divorce because you did it before Islam. You didn't know. Whatever you did after Islam will count. And that's why he tells him, هي عندك على واحدة. That means if you divorce her one more time, she's going to have to marry another man. This hadith, although it's very clear, but there's 2 problems. Number 1, it's specifically regarding divorce. How are we supposed to take a matter regarding divorce and say that qa'idat al-jub applies to all obligations, marriage, divorce, fasting, praying, khum, zakat? This is problematic. 2, it has a weak chain of narrators. You see, my dear friends, in fiqh, we don't play around. In fiqh, we need a strong chain of narrators. You want, as a mujtahid who wants to issue a fatwa, don't come and tell him, I found this hadith, I found that hadith. In fiqh, you need a strong chain of narrators and a strong source. First of all, the source has to be reliable. Two, the chain has to be strong. And hence, the scholar has to do his rijali homework. He has to study the chain of narrators. If it's unreliable, there's no way you can issue a fatwa based on a weak tradition. A fourth piece of evidence. This is a hadith narrated in Tafsir Ali ibn Ibrahim Al-Qummi, one of our oldest books of tafsir, if not the oldest. After the conquest of Mecca, a lot of people came and converted to Islam. A lot of people converted to Islam. One of the individuals who converted to Islam was the brother of Salama. Who's Salama? The wife of Rasulullah. Rasulullah turned him down. Salama, she came and complained to Rasulullah that, Ya Rasulullah, all these people in Mecca, they came and they converted, and you accepted their conversion. My brother came and converted, you rejected him? He said, yes, because he's the one that said, وَقَالُوا لَن نُؤْمِنَ لَكَ حَتَّى تَفْجُرَ لَنَا. The verse that we will not believe in you lest you do this and that and you perform miracles. He was rejecting Rasulullah. He says, he was rejecting me, and hence I don't accept his conversion. Salama tells him, Ya Rasulullah, but you said, إِنَّ الْإِسْلَامَ يَجُبُّ مَا قَبْلَهُ. You said Islam eliminates what preceded it. And my brother said this when he was a kafir, not when he was a Muslim. Rasulullah said, yes, you're right. You're right. I apologize. I accept his conversion. Now, this hadith is also rejected. We can't accept this hadith. Again, for two reasons. One, because of the chain of narrators. The chain of narrators is unreliable. Two, and this is the argument by Sayyid Al-Khoi. Sayyid Al-Khoi says we can't accept this hadith. Why? Because it seems that Rasulullah is ma'soom. He's infallible. It seems that he took it personal. He had a personal grudge against the brother of Salama. So either he purposely did not accept his conversion or he forgot. And in both cases we can't accept the hadith, because both cases are not acceptable. The fifth evidence and proof for qa'idat al-jub, and this is the evidence that we accept. This is the evidence that we build upon. And for this reason, we accept qa'idat al-Islam yujubbu ma qabla. And most contemporary scholars, they rely on this evidence that I will mention now. What is it? At the time of Rasulullah, thousands and thousands of people converted to Islam. Thousands of people converted to Islam. Especially after the conquest of Mecca. 3 years before the death of Rasulullah, the demise of Rasulullah, thousands of people converted to Islam. We don't have a single hadith in which Rasulullah told them, okay, now come and make up for your salah. Come here. How old are you? 70 years old? Make up salah for example, 55 years. If we say bulugh occurred at 15, you have 55 years worth of prayers that you need to do. 55 years of fasting that you need to do. We don't have a single hadith, a single evidence that Rasulullah told them, make up your salah, make up your fasting. Or come and pay khums, come and pay kafara. Or that you stole during Jahiliyyah before converting to Islam, now let's come and cut your hand. Or you committed adultery, let me come and stone you, for example. Or whip you, for example. The punishment for adultery, the punishment for fornication. We don't have any case where Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam held anyone accountable after the conversion to Islam. Not one case where Rasulullah told them, you're responsible for the many years of salah that you didn't perform, or the hajj that you didn't perform, or the fasting that you didn't perform. Financial obligations or ibadat, generally speaking. This in itself is proof and evidence that Islam yajubbu ma qabla. Al-Islam yajubbu ma qabla. Islam eliminates anything that precedes it. Islam by converting to Islam, you're forgiven for all sins that you performed before and any obligations that you did not perform. Now, after conversion, you are no longer responsible for. So this is the main proof and evidence. This is solid evidence. This is very clear evidence that our ulama today rely on this proof of evidence. And they call it as-sira al-qat'iyya min zaman al-nabi. That we know for a fact that it was part of the seerah of Rasulullah to forgive those who converted to Islam. And he did not ask them to perform their ibadat that they missed before converting. Question. If I borrowed money from you before converting to Islam, I told you, give me $1,000. And then the next day I say, Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wa ashhadu anna Muhammad Rasulullah. Good luck, the $1,000 is gone. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. What do you say about that? I go and borrow money from bank, from individuals, and then I convert to Islam and I say, Al-Islam yajubbu ma qabla. Islam eliminates what precedes it. I am no longer responsible for the loans that I took out before converting. What do you say? Is this acceptable or is this not acceptable? Not acceptable. Why? You see, Al-Islam yajubbu ma qabla. Islam eliminates whatever preceded it that had to do with Islamic laws, like salat, fasting, khums, hajj, zakat. But there are logical laws amongst people. I borrow money from you, I have to give it back to you. Islam didn't teach me this. This is a law that existed before Islam. Islam cannot eliminate laws that existed prior to Islam. You see, Islam can only eliminate laws that it founded, it instituted. As for a law that was instituted from before, which is something very logical, something very rational amongst the uqala, amongst logical people, you borrow from me, I borrow from you. But on the condition that you give it back, I give you back your money and you give me back my money. Islam will not eradicate a law that it did not institute. It only eradicates laws that it instituted. Like praying. Islam said, Aqimus salah. Islam will come and say, okay, now that you converted to Islam, I'll release you from that obligation. But borrowing money and the need to give back money, Islam did not institute this law. This law existed before. This is one way of putting it. Another way is huququllah wa huquq an-nas. The rights of Allah and the rights of people. Islam will eliminate the rights of Allah Azza wa Jal. You owe Allah money, as in khums and zakat. Allah says, I'll release you of that obligation. But huquq an-nas, Islam will not come and release you of your obligation towards people's rights with what? With the idea of, with the notion of al-Islam yajubbu ma qabla. Islam eliminates anything that precedes it. No, this is huquq an-nas. And huquq an-nas you are in charge of, responsible of. This is not eradicated by qa'idat al-Islam yajubbu ma qabla. Another important point regarding this principle, the principle of al-Islam yajubbu ma qabla, ulama say this is qa'ida imtinaniyya. Qa'ida imtinaniyya. First of all, what does that mean? Number two, what does that entail? You see, qa'ida imtinaniyya means that when Allah instituted this principle, He was doing us a favor. He was doing this ummah a favor. Because this law, it works in our advantage, or it works for us or against us. For us, for Muslims. You convert to Islam, you're released of all of your obligations. So Allah was doing us a favor. He was doing the ummah a favor when He instituted the law of al-Islam yajubbu ma qabla. Islam eliminates what precedes it. This is what it means, what qa'ida imtinaniyya means. That Allah did us a favor. He's doing the ummah a favor by instituting such a law. That means, so this is what imtinaniyya means, that Allah did us a favor. And not just in this law. There are other principles that were a favor upon us. For example, la dharara wa la dharar. There is no harm in Islam. This is also qa'ida imtinaniyya. Allah did us a favor by instituting this law. How do we know this? Because the hadith says, لا ضرر ولا ضرار في الإسلام. Only in Islam there's no harm. Only in Islam. That means out of all of creation, all of humanity, this favor was done upon us, not upon others. Also, bara'ah. Bara'ah. What is bara'ah? That if you don't know, you could say everything's halal. If you don't know, you say everything's halal. This law of bara'ah is only for Muslims. Because Rasulullah says, رُفِعَ عَنْ أُمَّتِي مَا لَا يَعْلَمُونَ. Only my ummah can say the law of bara'ah. Say that as long as I don't know, everything for me is halal. It is not haram and it is not wajib. These sort of principles are called qawa'id imtinaniyya. That means Allah did us a favor. Allah did us a favor. So what does that entail? What does that mean for me and you? If this principle is a favor or it's not a favor, what does this entail? I'll tell you what it entails. If a kafir bought a house before Islam, he went and bought a house. The next day he converted to Islam. Is his buying and selling correct or incorrect? According to qa'idat al-Islam, يَجُبُّ مَا قَبْلَهُ. Islam eliminates what preceded it. So a week ago he bought a house. Now, does he still own the house or he doesn't own the house according to this principle? What do you say? He does. Why? Because if we say this principle eliminates his ownership of the house, is that a favor or not a favor? There's no favor. Because the convert will say, oh Allah, I converted to Islam to benefit, not to be harmed. By not allowing me to own my house, by eliminating my ownership of the house. That's not a favor upon me. That does me a disservice. And hence, qa'idat al-Islam yajubu ma qablah only applies to ibadat. It does not apply to mu'amalat. It only applies to acts of worship. You missed your acts of worship, you're not in charge of doing them. But as for mu'amalat, a non-Muslim got married before converting to Islam. Now that he converts, we tell him that your marriage is invalid? No, because that does a disservice to him. So that's not a favor to him. That's a disservice to him. Or he bought, he sold, he rented a car, we tell him, no, go give back the car. Why? Because al-Islam yajubu ma qabla. It doesn't work that way. Because this principle was meant to do a service to him. It was in his favor. It doesn't go against him. This is one. Two, what if a non-Muslim, before converting to Islam, he heard a person and he had to give diya. He had to give blood money. For example, he killed someone. By accident. By accident or even on purpose. Even on purpose. Al-Islam yajubu ma qablah says that we will not punish you. Now that you converted to Islam, you murdered someone before Islam, I will not punish you. And hence, Wahshi, the killer of whom? Hamza alayhi salam. When he converted to Islam after the conquest of Mecca, Rasulullah accepted his repentance. And he did not punish him for his crime of killing his uncle Hamza in the battle of Uhud. Why? Al-Islam yajubu ma qabla. Islam eliminates what precedes it. However, what about diya? Blood money. Is he responsible for the blood money that he spilled, the blood that he spilled before Islam? Now that he's converted, is he required to pay diya or is he not required to pay diya? What do you say? Why? Why is he required? First of all, it's a personal matter. So it's huquq al-nas. It's not huquq Allah. Blood money, ad-diya, is huquq al-nas. It's not huquq Allah. This is one. Two, it would be a disservice to the ummah. The ummah would object to Allah. Would say, oh Allah, he converted. You're releasing him of the obligation of diya. It's good for him, but it's bad for us. What about our blood money? What about our diya? This person spilled the blood of someone in my family. Sure, you don't want to execute him, don't execute him. Don't punish him, but give me the blood money. This goes back to the fact that This qa'ida is qa'ida what? Imtinaniyah. That it's a favor. It's doing a service to the ummah. So it only works if it's doing a service to the ummah. If it's doing a favor to the ummah. But if it's doing a disservice to the ummah, it doesn't apply. I'll ask you another question. And here, ulama are split. Here, ulama are split. For example, the author of Al-Urwatul Wuthqa says one thing. As-Sayyid al-Hakim in his Mustamsak says another. Here, the ulama are split. And that's the topic of zakat. Let's say this convert to Islam. Before converting, he was a farm owner. He owned farms. He had cattle. He had sheep. He had cows. And we know that he has to pay the zakat. For example, for every 40 sheep, one has to be given to zakat. For example, out of every, 100 sheep, 100 cows, for example, one has to be given for zakat, for example. Now, so he has a farm and he has cattle. Now he converted to Islam. Is he required to give zakat or is he not required to give zakat? Here, some ulama say he's required. Because if he doesn't give zakat, it's a service to him, but it's a disservice to the ummah. What about the poor? If he doesn't give that cow, with that cow, we could feed 200 people. Part of the nation, part of the ummah. If he pays his zakat, we could feed 200 people. By releasing him of the obligation of zakat, we're doing a disservice to the ummah. And we instituted that the qa'ida is imtinaniyah. It's doing a service to the ummah. So wherever it does a disservice, it doesn't apply. This is one argument. Another argument is that, no, he's also released of the obligation of zakat. Khums, zakat, the whole 9 yards. Why? Because thousands of people converted at the time of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and we don't have a single instance when Rasulullah told them, come and pay your zakat. You have to pay your zakat. You had a farm, you had sheep, you had cattle, you had cows, you had camels, you had dates, you had gold, you had silver. Come and pay in zakat. We don't have a single instance. We don't have a single hadith. Not even a weak hadith in which Rasulullah ordered them, not just Rasulullah, even the imams after him, because some of their companions were also converts to Islam. They were never asked to come and pay their zakat. So this seems to be the right answer. That a convert is not required to pay the zakat that he had to do when he was a non-Muslim. Obviously, he has to give zakat that is due after Islam. But the question is, before Islam, it seems that, no. Yes, brother. Okay. After Islam, definitely. Definitely, no. After Islam, there's no question. He becomes obligated just like everyone else. Another question. A convert to Islam, obviously non-Muslims, they engage in behavior that they're not supposed to, especially maybe in sexual conduct that he's not supposed to, or he's supposed to. Maybe he's married or not married. He didn't perform ghusl. They don't believe in ghusl. Now that he converts, does he have to perform ghusl for the first time, ghusl al-janaba, or not? Does al-Islam yajubbu ma qablah here apply and say that he does not need to perform ghusl al-janaba for his ibadat? He can simply perform wudu and pray. He can enter a masjid, or he needs to perform ghusl al-janaba. Now that he's converted to Islam, what do you say? He doesn't have to? He has to? He has to? No. Let's say he hasn't done ghusl al-jum'ah. No, by the way, ghusl al-jum'ah, it covers everything if you have the intention. If you don't have the intention, it'll only count as ghusl al-jum'ah. You can actually perform several aghsal at once. But with the intention. Without the intention, it only counts as one ghusl. So going back to our question, does a convert to Islam right at the beginning, if he's done something that requires ghusl al-janaba, is he required to perform ghusl al-janaba? Or do we say al-Islam yajubbu ma qablah, and it's as if he hasn't done anything that requires ghusl. He just simply performs wudu and salah. What do you say? Hajj Fu'ad says you should. Going once, going twice. Hajj Fu'ad is right. Why? Correct. But we have to be very detailed. There's a very detailed point. True, you have to purify. But why don't we apply al-Islam yajubu ma qabla? Just the same way that we applied it to salah. He doesn't have to perform salah that he missed or fasting that he missed. But if he did something that required ghusl al-janaba before converting, why do we tell him you have to perform ghusl al-janaba after? Why doesn't it count with the rest of the acts of worship? You see, al-Islam yajubu ma qabla, this principle says that don't worry about your salah and your fasting. But does it tell you that now you have tahara? No. It doesn't say you have tahara. And the proof of that is that a convert to Islam, now that he wants to pray, let's say he was never mujnib. He never did anything that would entail ghusl janabah. He's 15 years old, he converted to Islam. Now that he wants to pray, does he have to perform wudu or he doesn't have to perform wudu? He has to perform wudu. No one would say, because of the principle, that automatically gives him tahara, that automatically gives him wudu. No, no one says this. The principle doesn't give you wudu and tahara. It simply eliminates prior obligations. But does it give you tahara and it switches your janaba into tahara? No, it doesn't do that. And hence, a convert, when he converts, as soon as he converts, if he's done anything that requires janaba before Islam, he would have to perform ghusl janaba. Because al-Islamu yajubu ma qabla doesn't automatically give him tahara status. It doesn't do that. It eradicates his previous obligations, but it doesn't give him tahara status. I saw a hand. Yes. Sure, either someone tells them or they read about it. Obviously, when they convert, they will start learning. They will start reading. In fact, from personal experience, I believe that many converts, of course there's always exceptions, that a typical convert is more knowledgeable about Islamic laws than native-born Muslims. Because Muslims, they take their laws from lectures or parents, and a lot of it is wrong, by the way, especially the ones, the hand-me-down laws that were passed from generation to generation. A lot of them are inaccurate or wrong. While converts, they read. They read. They weren't not handed down these laws by their parents. They had to read, and they went to the authentic sources. So a lot of times, they end up knowing more than us on Islamic laws. A couple of more points and we conclude, inshallah. Another point on this topic, let me give a brief intro and then I'll ask the question. There are certain behaviors, certain sexual misconducts that if done, they cause a hurma forever. Like what? Like God forbid, if someone commits adultery with a married woman, whether he's married or not married, but if she's married and he commits adultery with her, even if later on she gets a divorce, he can no longer marry her. Khalas, there's a hurma abadiyya, an eternal hurma. There's an eternal forbiddance upon him from marrying her. Of course, this is the fatwa of most ulama. According to Sayyid Sistani, there's an ihtiyat wujubi, that as a necessary precaution, he never marries her again. There are some ulama that allow. For example, Sheikh Al-Fayyad. Sheikh Al-Fayyad says, if someone committed adultery with a married woman and now she's divorced or she's widowed and he wants to marry her, he can. But Sayyid Sistani does not allow. So keep this in mind. Also, if someone committed adultery with a lady, in the future he cannot marry her daughter, it becomes haram. It becomes haram on him to marry her daughter in the future. God forbid, someone commits a homosexual act with someone. He can no longer marry her sister. He can no longer marry her sister because he committed this act. Now, let's say someone before converting, he did some of these acts. He did some of these acts before converting. Now that he's converted, may he marry that woman whom he committed adultery with when she was married and now she's divorced or widowed or not? Or he committed adultery with a woman and now he wishes to marry her daughter. May he or may he not? Because he did this before converting. Now he has converted. May he or may he not? Here, ulama are split. There are some that say, yes, he may. For example, Sayyid al-Bujnurdi in his Al-Qawa'id al-Fiqhiyya, he has 7 volumes on jurisprudential laws in Islam, 7 volumes. When he researches and debates this law, he says, yes, these issues are terminated as if they never happened. As if he never, al-Islam yajubu ma qablah means it's as if he never committed adultery before Islam. So now he can marry her. She's divorced, he may marry her. This is his view. Other ulama say no. No, he cannot. Why? Because al-Islam yajubu ma qablah, we did not take it from a hadith. And we could hold on to the general hadith. We could say the Imam was general, the hadith was general. There's a itlaq, there's a umum. No, there was no hadith. And if there was a hadith, they were all weak. We saw that they were weak in their sanad. We took it from the seerah of Rasulullah. At the time of Rasulullah never held anyone accountable for the obligations that they missed, the religious obligations that they missed when they were kuffar. After converting, they were not responsible. But does it apply to this case? Does the hadith apply? Does the principle apply? No, it doesn't apply. It doesn't apply. Why? Because in Islam, any woman that a man committed adultery with and she was married, he may no longer marry her. He may no longer marry her, even if she gets a divorce. Does that change? Does that reality change? No, it doesn't change. Now he's converted. He can still say that this is a woman whom I committed adultery with before converting to Islam. That doesn't change. That fact doesn't change. It's not that all of a sudden, because of a miracle, that woman becomes a woman who he never committed adultery with. No, she's still a woman who he committed adultery with. That fact doesn't change. And hence, even after converting to Islam, is forbidden from marrying that woman. This is the other argument. This is the other argument. Sayyid al-Bujnurdi argues that al-Islam yajubu ma qablah, it includes this. It includes the matter that we're discussing. Why? Because he's been forgiven. It's as if it never happened. It happened, but it's as if it never happened. While other ulama say, no, it happened. And you can't change facts. A fact is a fact. He committed adultery. That's not gonna, his conversion is not gonna change that. So there's 2 sides to the story, 2 opinions. Similarly, and I'll conclude with this, similarly, if a gentleman or a lady before Islam, she had a brother by rida'a, by breastfeeding. So for example, when she was younger, when her mother was breastfeeding her, there was another child, another infant that was also breastfed by her mother, to the point that they became siblings. They became brother and sister. And that has rulings of its own. How many times is it? Most ulama say either 15 consecutive times that these children breastfed together from the same mother, from the same milk, or breastfeeding from a mother to the point that this child, this infant gains weight. You could see that the child, changed. After 2-3 days, he changed because of that milk. That lady becomes his mother. Al-Umm fi rida'a. Now, she's converted to Islam. And that same gentleman has now come to propose to her. Can she marry him or can she not marry him? If this had happened after Islam, it's her brother. He's not her biological brother, but he's her brother by rida'a, by breastfeeding. But this didn't happen after Islam. This happened before Islam. Does Islam negate, eliminate what happened before it? So as if he's not her brother, or Islam says no, he's still her brother and she may not marry him. What do you say? The brother in the back. She cannot marry him. Hajj Fuad, what's your fatwa? No. Any other fatwa? That's the correct answer. Why? Because again, Islam does not change the fact. Islam does not change the fact. He's her brother. They breastfed together from the same mother. After Islam, now that he converted, his conversion to Islam does not make him not her brother. He will remain her brother, and hence she may not marry him. This was a brief overview of this principle. قاعدة الإسلام يجب ما قبله. I hope that I was able to shed light on this principle. And again, it's very helpful for converts. And even if you're not a convert, these are laws of Islam that we should know. This is our fiqh, the fiqh of Ahlul Bayt that we should know. If there are any questions or comments on this principle or any of the previous principles or topics that we discussed, I'm more than happy to welcome. وصلى على محمد وعلى محمد. Yes, Hajj Fuad. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.